All right, guys, welcome back. This is Instructor Phil Demetriadis. This is the Intro to Digital Paint class, which for many of you, it's also an Intro to Photoshop class. So what we're going to do today, we have our Photoshop window open. We want to go create a new document, 11 by 17. So I'm going to come over to File, and I'm going to go over to New. And what I prefer to do is already have a document set up that's 11 by 17. If you want, you can click on the Art and Illustration tab, or actually, where was it? Just they had a pre-save tab, but I have my own that just comes up as 11 by 17 horizontal right there. You could enter it manually and say, I want you to be 11 by 17 inches orientation, not vertical, horizontal, 300 DPI I'm going to do so that way it prints good. So voila, there's my page. Okay, so when you click standard brushes, so if you hit the B icon and right click, those are the standard brushes that most of you have in Photoshop, okay, which are right there. So let me walk you through that again. Remember, sorry I was gone earlier this week, got sick, right? But if we hit B, B commands it to go to brush. If I don't want to do that, I can scroll down on my toolbox here on the left and I could select B right here and it's selected, okay? So when I have that selected, by right-clicking, that's one of the great benefits of a third button mouse. If I right-click on the canvas, it brings up my brushes for me because it allows me, see, I can hover over and quickly change between brushes. So some of your brushes might look like this, and some of you might actually have these brushes in as well. They're called natural brushes. So these are like the base Photoshop brushes. Well, guess what? Most of these brushes suck. Okay, they do. One of the great things about Photoshop and its adaptability over the years is you can bring in brushes that have different effects and they change the way the program works and the way it paints. So what I did is I gave you some of my custom brushes and I'm going to show you how to replace those brushes. This can be a little bit confusing to you guys, okay? So here's the general rule. I gave you a file that looks like this. It says Dart 135. You click it open. In this, you're going to see Phil's drawing and painting. Now, it doesn't say brushes. It says ABR. ABR is the extension for the brushes, okay? If I were to click those right now, it will automatically open them and put them on the back end of all my other brushes. The problem is then what? Then I have my sucky brushes on the top with my good brushes on behind. So I don't want to keep the sucky brushes, I want to get rid of them. So this is how we do that, okay? When you're in Photoshop, when we right-click on, when we hit B, and we right-click on our canvas, do you see this brush preset that comes up? By the way, remember the other way I showed you how to get this? You have it over here, and if you click this icon right here, it brings up your brushes right here, okay, as well. But these are like brush presets. I prefer it my way, which is this way. I right click on B, that way I have them all listed. Now, real quick, there's this little gearbox here in the upper right hand corner. Do you see that gearbox? The gearbox is really pivotal because it controls all of my viewing options for my brushes, just as it does in any other tool that I'm in. So any other tool that I open in Photoshop, it'll have a similar gearbox in the right corner and allows me to make adjustments, okay? So if I click on this gearbox right now, some of you might have brushes that look like this. They might be listed as a small thumbnail. I don't like the small thumbnail. It's too small to see. Some of you might have small list. Ooh, that's even much smaller and I don't like seeing that either, right? Some of you might have large list. Some people like that. Okay, some people might have stroke thumbnail. A lot of artists like this because it's showing you what the brush looks like as it goes through its pathway. Does that make sense? Okay, this one isn't bad. What I prefer is that I have memorized my brushes this way by large thumbnail, and there's also a reason why. This allows me to classify my brushes and to see it visually, and it's really interesting and easy for me to work, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. However, though, let's go back to what we were talking about. I have this on large thumbnail. So what I'm going to do is I want to replace these brushes right here. There's one way I could do that. If I scroll down, after this, I have something called the Preset Manager, which we'll talk about in a minute. I also have underneath this replace brushes. If I click replace brushes right now, okay, it's going to open up a window and say, where would you like to replace the brushes from? I just gave you a folder. So if you go over to your thumb drive and you find that folder I just gave you, which was labeled Dart 135, and then when you open that, it won't show those other presets I gave you because those aren't brushes. It's only, so some people open this and they go, hey man, wait a minute, I can't see my Photoshop file. It's not showing you Photoshop file. It's only showing you brushes which have an ABR extension, right? Right. So it shows. Now watch what happens if I click these and hit load. Look at what's happened to my brushes. You now have Phil's drawing and painting brushes that are in there. Okay, it's replaced them. All right. So, and what's cool, do you see what I do? I create these little text blocks. So I separate drawing from painting from texture. To me, that's a very efficient way to work because I quickly know where my drawing brushes are. And so later on, if I'm bored on this is my life, when I'm bored on a Friday night and my kids are at swim practice and my buddies are busy with their kids, I have nothing to do, I go brush hunting. And when I go brush hunting, I go to like DeviantArt, I go on sites that have free brushes, or students might send me something. So remember this, I'm giving you brushes that have taken me years to collect that artists share with each other. So when you get a really cool brush, I want you to share it with me. When you go, Phil, I have found the most amazing pencil brush in the world. Please give it to me so I can share it with other students. That's how we all get better. Okay, so let me back up really quick. I need to show you something else, okay? So watch, I'm gonna pretend. Let me come back and say replace brushes. Actually, hold on a minute. Everyone, let me pause the recorder for a minute. Resume. Okay, so this is what happens sometimes is you guys will make a mistake where you have your brushes like this and then you forgot to replace and you hit load. And watch what happens when I hit load right now and I load Phil's brushes I gave you. What did it do? It put my brushes at the bottom end. Remember I just told you about that? So then people panic and they're like, I don't want the other brushes. Okay, there's a way to get rid of it. I'm going to show you how to get rid of it. Okay, in that little gearbox right here, there's this really neat thing called a preset manager. I did not make the names. If I made the names, I would have called it the brush boss or the brush manager, something simple, right? If I click preset manager, it opens up and shows me all my brushes in a line. Now watch very carefully. If I touch a brush, it highlights it. And then when it highlights it, it says, do I want to rename it? Do I want to delete it? Or do I want to save it as a set? Now watch what happens if I hold shift and go across and touch the one next to it. It highlights both. What happens if I go like this and go all the way across? It selects that. Okay, that means later on in Photoshop, you might be working and you might have made the best brush ever that paints hair. But it took you hours and days to make, and you don't want to give it away. But somebody else wants one of your other brushes. So you go, fine. You can open the preset manager and you go, okay, I'm going to give him this brush. And now instead of holding shift, I'm going to hold control. And then you could say save set. So now it's going to save just those brushes on a separate ABR file so you can give to a friend if you'd like. Okay. However, though, that wasn't our goal here. What was our goal? To delete the brushes that were in here, right? So here's how you delete brushes. Number one, you select it and you go to delete. You just deleted a brush. Okay. Now, sometimes if you press Alt, see my little hand? It turns into a pair of scissors by pressing Alt. That can be hard to remember, so I just stick with the basics. I come over here and I touch from here to here. Those were the brushes that were in before that I no longer want, and I just say delete. Now that I've deleted those, I have Phil's brushes that you already loaded, so I don't need to save them, do I? No, I don't. Okay? The brushes I gave you, you're going to have to load whenever you come into class, because we put software on these machines called, what is it called? It's Soft Freeze or something like that. Deep freeze, thank you. I always screw that up. And basically, it's when we restart the machine, it revamps the machine back to zero. Because if we didn't do that, someone brings in something that has a virus, and then the virus would be contagious to your flash drives, or someone brings in 20 projects, they leave it on the desktop, and then it weighs down the machine. That way we eliminate that. Okay? All right, so that's what the preset manager does. It's there for me to save brushes and do export brushes. And remember, look, it still has the gear function next to it. So it allows me even to come back and load other brushes. Now, in the gear, remember I told you this was the list, right? The list function still works in the preset manager. So look, stroke thumbnail. See, that's pretty cool if you're working on textures and you want to see what the stroke of the brush does, right? That's important. So, but again, I still like seeing them like this as large thumbnail. Now, here I might be hard for me to scroll down in my preset manager, so that's why I might come to the gear and say, you know, let's look at them as a small thumbnail. That way I can see all my brushes. That's why we have those different viewing options. Okay? All right. So any questions at this point of where we're at? We're in the preset manager. Yes, sir?
It's not considered like stealing to use somebody else's brushes or like copyright, is it?
So here's the thing. There's this gray area in parts of Photoshop because people put up their brushes for free. People sell brushes. In fact, you can go to Gumroad and buy brushes. I've spent $30 on a pack of brushes before because the artist made them to paint a certain way, and $30 to me is going to Starbucks 3 times, you know, or 4 times, and that's nothing versus the brushes are going to go into countless hours of painting and work for me, right? So, but then what happens, here's another thing, right? A couple weeks ago, one of my students, actually last semester, one of my students said, Sparth has a bunch of brushes up there. I really respect Sparth and I like his work. I know people that know him in the industry. He's selling his brushes in a pack with some videos for, I think it was $40 or $50. So I told the students, they said, let's buy it and then we'll spread it out to everybody. And I said, no, that's not really cool. Why don't 1 or 2 of you guys buy it and then spread it amongst yourselves? That way he's still making money. Because remember, it's like a little artist thing where artists are trying to make money for themselves, for families, whatever. If you don't want to buy the brushes, then don't buy it. But there are also a lot of artists that put stuff up for free. Hence DeviantArt. DeviantArt used to really suck. Now it's totally changed where stuff's out there for free. So one thing I believe in is I get something for free. If I modify it, I give it to my students or I put it back out there or send it to people on my YouTube site. I'm like, hey, here's a free brush for you. Try this painting brush out, right? Because I believe in the freebie system. You know, it's the with like pay it forward type of system. Okay, so technically it's all right. You can go to different sites and you might find an illegal download, a Sparth or somebody else, but be very careful because people put viruses in brushes. I've had it happen. In fact, might be above your learning level, but this has happened to me. Once I downloaded a pack of brushes, I opened them in Photoshop. Every time I would open up Photoshop on my PC, Photoshop would crash. There's a way to fix that. If you go into the file settings for Photoshop, you go find the file. There's another file that's like a standard file that has brushes in it. You select it, you delete it. When Photoshop restarts, it automatically replaces that file with a default folder brush, which means it deleted your last set of brushes, and then Photoshop opens up again. So that has happened before. There are tools out there in the world, people that like to put viruses in little things that people download. So these viruses sometimes they're like key drivers. A key driver is software that runs behind your screen, and it sends a copy out of every password you enter your machine. And then later on, somebody will come in and remotely access your computer, hack your email, hack your account data, and so on. That's why I have my little password method, and that's why you have to be very careful about the things you download. And if you have a PC at home, I'm telling you right now, get a good antivirus, okay? So, not to go on this rant, but just quickly, okay, a decent antivirus to me the best antivirus is NOD 32. It stands for No Open Doors 32. It's the best there is. It costs me $90 every 2 years. Some of you don't have 90 bucks. The next step down from there would be, what's it called? A malware system that some are free, or AVG is the next one I would go to. That's very inexpensive or often free even for your phone. After that, McAfee, Norton, they sort of suck. They're not that good. They're easy to hack, and people know that. Unless the school has a version of one of those where they pay money and it's a special anti-hack thing, that's a different story, okay? If you have a PC at home, you are at a higher risk of getting viruses. If you have a Mac, Macs don't really get that many viruses because they're an open door operating software where they're constantly doing updates, and there are computer nerds out there that are constantly finding ways to update it, and they give it, and Mac pays them for doing it. It's called open door policy, all right? That's the difference between the OSs. Anyway, and did I answer your question? Okay, we're good to go. So back to this. So now we have these brushes, and that's how you get brushes in and out of your system. Just that's really confusing. Let me show you one more cool thing, okay? Remember that was the brush preset, all right? Come over here, go to Window, and scroll down on your window selection, and you have brush and brush presets. Remember, what was the hotkey for brush? It was F5. So if I click that right now, and if I drag this and drop it, it can drop brushes down, and then I can minimize this down. The problem is, depends how you're working here. So why am I showing you this? You can take this window. Some of you have a second monitor, right? Uh-oh. Why is it not coming off now? Get off. Hold on. So what I wanted to show you is this, is if you have a dual monitor, which some of you do at home, what's really cool is you can open up the brush preset window separate like this, and you could stretch it like this, and look, I'm going to drag it and put it on my second monitor. So you could be working on your second monitor looking at your brushes. Here's how I work at home is I take my brush presets and I drag them down here, and it highlights. Okay, hold on a minute. I need to drag this. Has to drag back up here to where it highlights in. Now that that's highlighted in, I drag brush presets down to the bottom, and it highlights in. And you see that? And then I grab this and I bring this down a little bit like that. I work from home like this quite a bit, where I extend down my palette, and then watch. Remember, I can adjust my view in here, right? So I could come over here, and I could tell it I want it to be large thumbnail. Boom. And that's golden for me because I'll be working at home, and I just come down here. So look at this. Imagine I'm up here painting in my workspace, and I go, oh, I want you because you're scratchy brush. And oh, I want you because you're, if I make you large and go like this, you're very textury and you produce metal very well. Okay, do you see how that works? So everyone has their own standard on how they want to work. It's up to you. I'm just showing you this because some of you have dual monitors, some of you don't. What is one of the downfalls of if I take my brushes here? Here, let me close the window. Okay. Close tab group. But then again, there are times where I like having this open. One of the downfalls of opening up a full brush window in brush presets, see, it keeps opening it back like this. So let me see if I can drag it back off. They changed some things there. I drag it back off. Here, now it's off the screen. So it's here on the right side of my screen. You see that? One of the downsides of this is it eats up more of the computer memory to do this. So Photoshop has this ability where you can pull windows off really quickly, but you're going to eat up more RAM. Okay, so with the ease of a workability, you also have a negative to it. So, or I can drag this back in here. That's why they created this little bar right here. So my brush presets are there, and I can just go, oh, brushes, open, close. And that's efficient for me as well. Okay, all right, so with that said and done, that is how we bring in brushes to our scene. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to remind you to go back to our blog. So what I'm going to do is click this open. I'm going to come over here and let's go to dart135.blogspot.com. Okay, when we open this, if you scroll down here, hold on a minute. Let me pause. I didn't turn the recorder on. Okay, so when you get back to the blog, we have our image up here, right? This is what it looks like. Click on the squares. We're going to right click it, okay? And I want you to say save picture as, okay? And then we're going to save it to, go back to your desktop. You have that file I gave you, Dart 135. Go in there, create a new folder. You right click in there, say new folder. And I'm going to call this exercise 2. This is going to be us painting textures. So exercise 2, if you want to call it textures, that's fine. There it is. I hit open. Okay, it opens that folder for me. And now I'm going to save this as squares 1. Save. Okay, there it is. All right. Now, so now what I'm going to do is go to Photoshop. I'm going to say go to File. I'm going to go to Open. I'm going to go back to that folder, which is Dart 135, right? Exercise 2 textures. And then I'm going to grab that folder and hit Open. And there it is. I opened it, right? When I have that open now, I'm going to select all, copy. I'm going to go over to my 11 by 17 window. Remember, we work in 11 by 17? I'm going to hit paste. And look at what it did. It put the squares in here. Now, it showed up a little low res because I have a limitation of what I can put on the blog. So I'm going to hit Control T for transform. And I'm going to scale these up a little bit larger to about that size and hit enter. Okay? Everyone follow with me on that? I'm going to pause real quick to make sure everyone's good to go. Okay. All right, so here we have our box on the top. Let's duplicate our box so we can have it as other layers to use. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to select this layer, and let's label it. So I'm going to call this top boxes. To label it, I double-click on the list label that used to say layer, okay? So there it is. I've duplicated, I have those boxes labeled, right? Now, remember how to duplicate a layer. We had 2 ways to do it. Way number 1 is I grab the layer and I drag it down to the layer icon and it'll make a double of it, okay? Or I right click on the layer and I go over and I tell it to duplicate. Now you'll notice when I duplicate the layer, the reason why I like this more is look at what it does. See what it does? Let me show you again. When I right click on the layer and I tell it to duplicate layer, it behaves very gentlemanlike and says, what would you like to call me? And that's really important to me because then I don't have to do it later. So then I could come in here and I'm going to say, oh, top box middle and hit OK. But then you're like, wait a minute, where's the layer? I just made a new layer. Why is it not showing? It's sitting on top of the other one perfectly because I duplicated it. So what was my move button? Remember? V. So if I hit V and if I hit my arrows on my keyboard, look at what happens. Magic. I'm moving the layer downward. When I get the layer where I want it to be, about there, I stop it. Okay? Got it? Now, let's duplicate that layer and move it down again. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to tell it to duplicate layer. It comes up and goes, what would you like to call me? And I'm going to call it top boxes bottom. Hit OK. Boom. Hit V again, hit the arrows, and then they slide back down. If you don't want to hit the arrows, you can grab it with your move tool like this. And check this out. Photoshop, see what Photoshop does with these pink lines? Watch the pink lines come up on my screen. They're guidelines. It's telling me if you put it right there, you're in the same place as all the other ones. Do you see it lit up? And then if I come down a little bit, it goes, yeah, right about there is the same distance as it was before. In fact, right there is perfect. Photoshop's being nice and even telling me that. So I leave it there, and voila, I have 3 different boxes to paint from. Okay? Now, I'm not going to merge all those layers together, but now you have your your canvas set up so we can go in and paint some textures. Okay? All right. So, what we're going to do next, is everyone with me? We have this done. Okay, so real quick, let's go back, make sure that we have loaded in brushes. This is where I'm going to let you guys start experimenting with brushes, and I'm going to show you how to paint a couple textures. Okay, and how to get going with that. All right, so first off, make sure that you click B, and if you go to B, you've loaded these brushes right here. The ones I gave you, Phil's drawing and painting brushes. Okay? Which, by the way, let me show you really quick. I gave you my drawing brushes just in case. And let me explain to you what they are. So I could pause the recorder. Do you want me to pause it or keep it on there? So, real quick, I'm having an ADHD moment here where I'm going to show you what the drawing brushes do, okay? So what I'm going to do really quick is turn off all my boxes, and I'm going to add another layer up here. So I'm going to show you what they do, okay? This brush, I grabbed, I don't know from where, from somebody. Actually, I think, no, I made this one at home. And what I'm going to do is let me switch to like a rough tone color like this. This brush is something I use for blocking. What I like about it is it's really loose, but then if I come back on it, see, I can build a gradient very effectively. Do you see that? So when I'm painting digitally, it gives me a nice feel for like painting in, especially if I go down to like 2 or 3, I can paint in ground plane and I could build stuff up, and it has just a nice rough feel to it. I only use that for painting, okay? I never use it for drawing, even though it's in my drawing brush. It was an accident. I sort of did that on purpose because I want you guys to go delete it. So I'm going to show you how to delete it real quick. Watch. When I hit B and I come in here, when you go to select a brush, be very careful you do not hit the Alt button at the same time. When you are in a brush selection mode, if you hit the Alt button, look at what happens. It gives me what? A pair of scissors. And if you have a brush, Dan, that you created, that you spent months on, and you didn't back it up, and you touch it like this, it is now gone forever, and there's no getting it back unless you saved it. That's why whenever you're doing what I do on a Friday night, if you're bored and you're building brushes and saving them and doing all this stuff, save your brushes. Okay? All right. So these brushes right here, this is my key drawing brush. That's my key pencil brush. That's my erase brush. Let me show you why I use the erase brush. I'm going to hit E, and I'll show you why I like to use this. And what's funny is I found out other people in the industry use the same brush as well. Because when I'm in erase mode, it keeps a very nice, it has a wedge shape that allows me to get into little cracks and corners. Do you see that? Now check this out. If I'm erasing and I hold down Shift, ooh, look at that. And if I touch while holding Shift, that allows me to go around a character or something or a painting and clean up lines like this by holding Shift. I could bring them, the touches as close or as far as possible, and I get a nice straight cut edge. That's why I love that brush for erasing. I don't really use it for painting. Okay? All right, go back to B. Go back, and if you select this little guy right here, and I'm going to go to a blue, this brush right here, so I'm at 100% opacity. It almost acts like a marker, and it acts like a pencil brush. So if I'm sketching, watch what happens when I press down lightly and then I press down dark. It goes full dark. That's a special setting we'll talk about later, how to customize brushes. That's what's called a transfer setting in the brush. Okay, so this allows me to come in very lightly, and I can be sketching like a gorilla or something, and I can get my eyes in, and I could look at, part of a nose or whatever, and I could get part of a face in, and it allows me to just come in to sketch, and I can be very light, or I could come down and press down and get really dark. See that? It has a cool drawing effect, and I love that brush. I gave that to my buddy Joe Weatherly, who teaches animal drawing here, and Joe fell in love with it too. Okay, especially I'm at 100% now. What happens if I drop down to like 70 or make it even a little bit smaller? It behaves nice and thin like a pencil, and then it also gets very dark like that. Okay, so it's a cool brush. Now, this other brush next to it, I call it the Spaceship Brush because it's a brush I created by accident. And if you make it bigger, how do we make brushes bigger? The bracket keys, remember? So if I hit the bracket keys right now, and tap it once with my mouse, look at what the brush looks like. That's why it's a spaceship brush. It's a rough spaceship I made in Maya. I brought it in because I started figuring out really good brushes have gradient patterns inside them. Some of you are like, what is a gradient pattern? It means it has dark to light imperfections of gradients inside them, because the blacker the brush, the less ink goes through, the wider, the more ink goes through. Does that make sense? So where that is helpful for me is when I took this brush down and I make it about yay big, and I drop it down to about 80%, it feels like pencil. And it can get very dark. It actually reminds me of pen. So I get these nice, soft sketches in it. And it's been great for sketching and roughing and doing thumbnails, no matter what I'm sketching on. And it has like a nice feel. It feels like a couple of the pens that I like to use. And that's at 80 right now. Sometimes I use this brush at 50. And it just feels nice. It's soft. And it's fun to sketch with, you know, and you can look at different people, and it just reminds me of, you know, working with some kind of a cool pen, you know. Anyway, so those are two of the brushes that I gave you. You don't have to use them right now because we're painting, right? But they're there. The eraser's there for you to erase anything that you don't like. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so let me stop the recorder real quick and save what I have so we don't lose it. We're at 31 minutes. Okay, so now we're back on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the top box. Now I'm going to grab a top, put it on the top, and move the layer up so I can see it. Okay, what I'm going to do is that's selected, and I can go paint on top of that right now, right? If you want to keep the black line there and paint underneath that, you can do that too. This is how you do that. I'm going to create a layer. So I hit the layer tab. I'm going to bring it down under top boxes, and I'm going to call this layer top box paint. Okay, because that's the layer I'm going to paint on, right? I'm going to go to the layer above, which is called top box. And I need to turn this to multiply. Because right now, if I come to top box paint, and if I come over here, I'm going to pick a brown color. Okay, so if I come over here right now with my brush, so I hit B, I'm going to grab one of these rough textures. By the way, up here, 25 and number 175 are two of my favorite block-in brushes of all time. Okay, so I'm going to select 175 here. You guys see it? When I hit right-click on the brush, it's right here. It's the big guy here. So when I bring that over here, see, if I come over here and paint right now, nothing's showing. Nothing's showing because the top layer is on normal. Watch what happens when I put the top layer on multiply. I can see underneath it. It tells the layer to become see-through. Okay? So I'm going to walk you through right now. Some of you are going to accidentally paint on this layer, which is okay. If you paint on this layer, you can. Okay, but then you're going to paint over the black line, which is fine. It's up to you. Okay, so if you don't want to paint on it, this is where you have to become, this is one of the most important things of Photoshop, always aware and checking what layer you are painting on. Once you stop checking what layer you're painting on, what happens, folks? You screw up and you put everything on the wrong layer and you lose time. So what I'm going to do right now is select a brown. So wait, I'm sorry, let me back up there. Top boxes, right? It has on multiply. If I want to make sure I don't paint on that layer, do you know what I could do? I can select the layer really quick, and if I scroll down, actually, let me just show you, here's the easier way, is if I select the layer and I come down here, actually just hit your question mark on the layer. So if you hit the question mark on your keyboard, I'm touching top boxes, and then I hit the question mark on my keyboard. You see what it did? Put a lock on the layer. When it locked the layer, I can't paint on it now, can I? I locked it. Okay. There used to be, hold on, there used to be another command in here. Here, I'll walk you through that again. Hold on 1 minute. I thought it was in here as well, another way to lock it, but maybe I'm mistaken. Oh, there it is. I'm just looking up here. I'm so used to doing it with a hotkey. So, and then right here is this. If I click that, it locks the layer. It's the same principle. See that? Okay, so if I'm on top boxes, I want to use the line, but I don't want to paint on the layer. What do? You lock it. So I'm going to select top boxes, lock it, and remember the layer underneath is called top box paint. So now I'm going to go down there and I'm going to start painting in that box. So any other questions before we proceed? Because now I'm going to get into using the layers and how you paint textures successfully. Okay? Everyone cool? All right. Most textures are painted working from dark to light. Every now and then, there are light textures where you work from maybe like mid-tone to light, and then you come in, and a good example of that would be wood grain. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start to paint a couple textures out of my head right now to show you how to use the layers efficiently. Okay? Because part of, so here are the laws. Here are the not Roman rules, Phil's rules, okay, for painting textures. Number one, a lot of them are going to be from dark to light, right? Number two, you're going to have multiple layers sitting on top of each other. And remember, the layers do different things. That's a huge part of digital painting. All right, so now I'm going to begin. So remember, I said let's start from a darker color. So what I'm going to do is, remember the Marquee Tool? That little square? If I press M, I select the Marquee Tool. I come over here. I'm going to drag over the box. And remember, I'm not on top boxes. I lock that layer. I'm on top box paint right now. So I'm going to come over here with my brush, and I'm just going to press down, and I'm going to completely press down, hit 0 at 100% until I fill that entire box with that color. Okay? I got it done, right? Right. Now, next, what I'm going to do is come down here. I haven't showed you how to use your color picker yet. Your color picker, you have this two little white boxes over each other, or there might be colored boxes right here. How you use it is if I hit X, watch what happens to the boxes. The white one comes on top of it. Do you see that? And if I hit X again, the dark box comes on top. Okay? We have two colors to rotate because that's the color I just used, which is my base color. So let's open up this color right now. That was my base, right? I'm going to come up here and make it a little bit lighter like this. Okay? Remember, we're working dark to light. So now I'm picking a light color. Now, what happens if I paint directly on top box paint? If I come over here right now and grab another brush, one of these textured ones like this guy right here, I hit my brackets, I make them larger, and if I paint on that guy right now, I've blended that officially into the layer. That is not a good thought, is it? What is a good thought is making another layer. So the easiest way to, and the best way to work is to have my layers labeled, right? So I'm going to come over, right click on top box. I'm going to tell it to duplicate it, right? Because when I tell it to duplicate it, Photoshop's going to be a gentleman and come up and say, what would you like to call me? So I'm going to call it top box, okay, texture, TEX, overlay, OL1, right? And then I'm going to hit OK. So I'm going to label it top box, text, TEX. I'm going to abbreviate. Abbreviation is going to be important when you're using layers, right? Because it's easier to get it up to see it on the layer option. TEX for text, OL, and then 1. You have a question?
Yes. How do I do the multiply of the
Select the layer. Here, I'll show you real quick.
I missed that.
Select the layer.
Yeah.
Come up here to the layer. You're going to need to take the lock off. When you have the layer selected, which is top boxes, look right above it.
Okay, there it is.
You have normal, just go to multiply, and then hit the lock button, and then you lock it.
Oh, yeah, to take the lock off.
That's right.
It still doesn't show.
Okay, and actually I need to show you guys something that are you okay?
Do you have to do the overlay as
What I was about to show you is when I was trying to teach you a lesson on duplicate a layer, what I did that time when I duplicated is it duplicated the whole color. So I was trying to show you guys that when you duplicate a layer, you have to think about sometimes what you're duplicating. So in this case, when I duplicated that layer, do you see how it's showing me in the icon what I see? See how I have two versions of red right there? So some people are a little bit behind right now, and they haven't even filled their boxes yet with red. So I need to go back really quick. Okay, so, black, it doesn't matter. I picked, what I did is I told you guys to use like a brown. Okay, so let me go back there, and then here. I was trying to show you an example of how there are benefits of duplicating a layer, but sometimes there are benefits against you. So the benefit of what I was going to show you is when I duplicated this layer. Let me show you again. Okay, well, let me delete it really quick. You guys hold on, don't even move or do anything, because I have to get caught up back to where you guys are. Okay, so what I did is I duplicated this layer because I wanted to start painting textures on it, right? The problem I was trying to show you is when you duplicate a layer, all I did was duplicate the brown that was here. So what I really need to do in this circumstance was to create I need a layer that's blank. So whenever I show you guys a task, I'm trying to teach you the pros and cons of that task. Okay, so in this example here, I need to create a new layer above it, because when that new layer is up there, then I need to double click that and call it texture paint overlay. Okay, because then now I could come in with a lighter color, and when I'm painting on top of that, do you see that? It's on a separate layer above. Okay, so sorry if I got that confused. Now, let me stop the recorder real quick, because some people are way back. Okay, all right, so pause, resume. So I'm going to back up here a couple steps, okay, because people got a little confused. So what I'm going to do really quick, I'm actually going to delete this layer. I'm going to come back here. You have right now top boxes should be on multiply with a lock on it, right? What I'm going to do is create a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer top box paint, which most of you already have, and I'm going to fill this with brown. So I'm going to come over, I'm going to use my marquee selection, because if I come in here with a brush right now, and if I start painting, what's going to happen? My paint's going to go outside of my box, right? So I'm going to take the marquee by hitting M. Remember, we already used that tool for copy and paste. I'm going to drag it over. The marquee is the second tool under the move tool here. I'm going to drag it over my box. Okay. I'm on the top box paint layer, right? When I have this here, I'm going to come in here. Now look at how nice when I fill it full of paint. But remember, I don't want light brown. What did Phil say we wanted? Dark brown. Because we're going to paint a texture and go from light to dark. Okay? So look, I'm going to come in here right now, and I'm going to paint in a dark brown color. All right, got it? Got it. Now, I tried showing you another step. Ignore that step I was going to do because it confused everybody. Next, we're going to paint something lighter on top of it. Why? Because I told you the majority of textures when you first start in digital painting, we paint from dark to light. Later on, when you learn to cover with opaque color, you can start painting light textures like wood grain and so on. And there's like sand and other textures, right? Now that I have this done, my goal today is to teach you how to paint your first texture and to give you an idea of how to use the brushes more effectively, okay? And how the layers affect the texture. So I have this on a separate layer, right? I'm going to come down here right now, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say, I'm going to select this. I'm going to come down here, click a new layer above it. It's going to give me an empty layer called layer 1. When layer 1 is done, select this, and I'm going to call this text layer, short for texture layer, if I can type right. Actually, since I'm on top box, I'm going to label it, like I told you before, top box TEXLAYR. Okay? ER, or however you want to abbreviate it, it's up to you. Okay, now with that selected, nothing's on this layer. Do you see it? The layer is empty. So now I'm going to come back here with my brush. I'm going to change brushes. How do I change brushes? Remember, I hit B, I hit my right mouse button, and then I can go to grab another brush. I'm going to grab this brush right here, number 80. Okay? Now you'll notice that brush is really small. It's not going to do anything. So I need to hit my brackets. Remember, brushes come in all different shapes and sizes. They perform differently in different heights. So now by hitting my brackets, I'm going to get my brush to be about that big. Do you see it? When it's that big, I'm going to come in here and tap it, okay? But nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Does anybody know why right now? I'm on the same color. I'm just applying the same color, which isn't doing anything. So what I'm going to do is I need to come down here and go to a lighter color. Now when I stamp on top of this, do you see that? And I'm going to stamp around it. It's creating a form of a texture. Do you see that? So right now what you should have is you should have, if I turn it off, top box, and then above it I have the layer, the texture part. Okay? So I'm going to do that again. Here we are, back to square one. I need to pause the recorder for a little bit. I don't mind going over things. Okay? All right, everybody's back with me. This is what you should have. You should have a bottom layer that's in brown, a top layer that's lighter. Okay? So now I'm going to show you how do we create other layers and use the layers we already have to change what we have right here. So let me show you a couple different ways. Way number one, okay? I'm going to create another layer up on top here. I'm going to call it highs, like that, okay? I'm going to take highs. I'm going to come over here, select an even lighter color, and then I'm going to come back over here, pick a different brush, enlarge the size of my brush, like this, and I'm going to just go 100%, and sort of streak it across, and I'm going to get these weird color overlays, like that, okay? Now, you'll notice what's happening when I'm doing this, folks. My brush is going everywhere. Why is my brush going everywhere? Because I no longer have the area selected. So if I come over here with my Marquee Tool really efficiently and select it, any type of movement that I do with my brush will land inside that box, right? So look, if I take this brush and I go like that, I just put a dotted pattern on top of there. You see how I did that? Okay? Right, now, here's the cool thing about, so look, now I have 3 layers. I have my base layer. Actually, let's count them off from the top. I have my high layer. Right here, do you watch it? See it go? There's highs. What I have after highs? Texture. And what I have after texture? Base. That right there is the secret to painting textures, is building up 3 different layers. If you think about your textures as a base layer, a texture layer, and a highlight layer, that's what starts to give convincing little textures. Now, I'm going to show you, there's more advanced techniques just waiting to come. This is just our first pass at painting. Okay? This time, let me show you another way, something else you can do that's really cool. Watch this. Okay, everyone follow with me. Do you remember when we did the first exercise, we had the image adjustments? We had Control Balance, Control B, we had Control L for levels. Do you guys remember that? Okay, check this out. This is working smart in Photoshop. This is actually a pretty cool little technique. I'm going to come back here to this layer right here. Do you see that? Okay. I'm going to duplicate this layer by right-clicking on it and duplicating it. And remember what I tried showing you before. When I duplicate that layer, it's taking everything in the layer that already exists. Right? Everyone follow with me? It's taking that texture that's already there. After you create this, okay, I want you to come over, hit V, which is your move button, And now I want you to hit your arrow up once and to the left once. And then leave it alone. Okay? And then I want you to come over and hit Control L, which was levels. And then I want you to lighten that texture a little bit. And hit deselect. So let me show you what happens when I did that. I lightened the layer above it. Do you see that? So now I can move that. Oops, hold on. I hit the wrong layer. Wait a minute, let me back up there. I had an accidental. Okay, hold on a minute. Now, after I made it a little bit lighter, look at what happens when I move it. So when I have V and hit the move arrows, do you see what's happening? Let me turn it on and off and show you. Underneath it was the identical copy that was darker. Do you see that? Okay. That means that the copy I put on top and made lighter, when I moved it a little bit, it creates a little shadow effect. Do you see that happening? So that's cool. That creates another little texture variant there for me that adds to part of my texture. So that's another way I can modify a texture. What happens here, let's just go up to normal and let's experiment. What if I put that on something like lighten? What does it do? It doesn't do anything. What if I put that onto overlay? Ooh, see that? It went soft and put an orange tint to it, and then it blended it in. When we work with multiple layers, so everyone look up here at the board real quick. This is our base layer, right? That's our base color. That was our texture layer. This is our high layer, okay? So when we start building up multiple layers, you can do whatever you want. If you decide to put another layer up here and call this high number 2, that's fine. You might decide to put another one up there and you could call it pebble. That's fine. But all these layers come together to make a cool texture, okay? That's how you need to think about Photoshop when it comes to digital painting. We just don't sit there and paint. We build things up in a series of layers that give a certain effect, okay? So as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to put this one onto normal, and I'm going to leave it like that, and I'm done right now, okay? So I'm going to come back over, and I'm going to paint the square next to it, okay? This time, I'm going to come over here. So where am I going to start, folks? On the box paint layer. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hit M for the Marquee Tool. I'm going to select this. I'm going to come over here. This time I'm going to go something with a little bit more of a red tint to it. Something probably a little bit more like that. Okay? So I'm going to come in here. I'm on the right layer. I can turn it off and on to check. And I'm going to come down, take one of my large brushes. So part of this exercise is for you to experiment with the brushes and learn how to start using your layers. So I just painted that in with this brush. Now what I'm going to do, flip to a different color, and I'm going to go with a light purple of some kind. But this time, put your brush on like a 1 or 2 and see what happens. Can you see that on my screen at all? What's happening is it's lightening and darkening some areas. Do you see that? Okay, so that's going to be my base paint. Now I'm going to come up to the texture layer. So now I'm going to come over and grab a different funky brush. Look at this brush. See this one? It's called number 491. This thing, I want to switch to a little bit of an orange. This thing is already a predetermined texture. Watch what it does. When I come over about right there, see that? It just put like a rustic glow on that. But remember, I put that on the layer above. Okay? Now I'm going to come back over to my highlight layer. Okay? So look at my highlight layer. I'm going to come up to that layer, and I'm going to change brushes. I'm going to go to something different. Like I have this brush right here. This does a really good like old paintbrush or rust effect. I'm going to go to a lighter color, maybe a little bit of yellow, and now watch what happens when I come over and I touch the top of it. See that? Congratulations, you just painted your first old-looking paint texture. Okay? Everyone follow with me? So all I want you to do is experiment right now with the brushes, but remember this. You can have as many layers as you want. What's important is you keep everything on the same layer. You keep your base paint layer, which is your darker value. And then you go to a texture layer. You go to a highlight layer. You can go to a pebble layer, whatever you want, as long as you work in this format. Some of you are going to screw up. When you screw up, I'm going to show you what you do. You just commit to the layer. What does that mean? Everybody watch real quick. I've screwed up and I painted on a bunch of different layers. So what am I going to do? I'm going to select all my layers that I painted on. I'm going to hit E, which is merge all layers. And look, everything now is on one layer. See that? And if you screw up, that's okay. Everyone's going to make a mistake. You're going to forget. Oh my God, when I first started in Photoshop, I had like 90 layers, killing the program, bogging it down. I forgot what I was painting on. I wasn't labeling them. You're going to do that. That's normal. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to start. I'm going to merge all my layers, but I still like what I have, right? I have that cool, those two different textures there, right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to keep that on one layer. I'm going to create 3 more layers. I'm going to come back. I'm going to label this base. This is usually how I work at home. I just stay simple. Base. I call this text for texture, and I call this highs. And you know what? I might even make another one, just because sometimes I have highs too. I'm going to go back down to base. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to select this third square. Let's come over here. Just pick a random color. Go blue. A darker color, right? So I'm picking, remember, that's lighter. That's pure chroma. Darker is going to be a little bit more black, somewhere down in there. Okay, hit OK. So I have that done. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to try one of these paint brushes that I have. I'm going to take this. This time, I'm going to see what happens if I do a vertical effect like this. What if I vertically paint in a base color and leave little stripes in it? That's sort of cool, right? Now I'm going to go to my text layer. So I'm going to come over here, hit B. I'm going to go to a different brush. I'm going to grab this guy. Okay. Now I need to change colors, right? So I come up here. I'm going to go a little bit more to this gray. I'm going to come over here. And now remember basic drawing principles. We had stipple, you had crosshatch, and you could drag. So what happens if I come over here and I go drag and drag it down? And then I drag it down there. Ooh, it changes. Okay, what if I don't want to do the drag? What if I want to do a stipple technique? This brush has something on it called jitter. You know what jitter is? Jitter is every time I touch the brush, Photoshop goes, okay, I changed it. And it changes the angle of the brush so it doesn't follow in the same pattern. We call that a jitter control. So now every time I touch it, it's rotating the texture differently, right? See that? It's giving me a different texture feel. Okay, how about this one? In my brushes, check this brush out right here. The soft guy. The soft guy is great because it allows me to put highlights on something. Okay, it allows me to do a fade in, a gradient. Okay, so watch this. Now this might be a little advanced, but just watch. Think about it. This texture I just put in is on text layer, right? Remember, if I want to select all that, do you remember the keys I showed you in the first exercise? Command All, V, and then one of the move keys. And it just selected only what's on that layer, which is the texture only, right? When I have that done, yes?
Can you repeat the step where you
Selected it? Yeah. So I'm on the layer with the text, Command All, V, the move button, and one of the arrows. And it'll select just that texture part for me, right? Now, the ants really hard to look at. If I hit Control H on my keyboard, do you see what it did? It hides the ants. And if I hit Control H again, they come back. This is why that's important. If I hide the ants right now, and I pick a soft white color, and if I go back to my brush, watch when I hit H real quick. See? So now when I come in here, I can create a highlight of paint on the gradient. Sorry, I accidentally moved down to layer 0 by accident. I don't know how that happened. Look, see what I'm doing? See, I'm highlighting one side like this, and then see how it's much brighter than the other side? And then, oh wait, I don't like that. Hit Control H. Don't worry, everything's selected. You could go back and paint in the original color. Or look, what happens if I come in here, I want to swab. I'll go, okay, I want to go back to the original color. I touch there, it grabs that color. I come back and I paint a little bit more in. And then you're like, wait a minute, I'm a pro now. I'm going to zoom in, look at the texture, and try to paint dark areas. So I'm going to come over here, grab a darker color, come in here, and then remember, Command H, look at your selection. Now I'm going to see if I can paint some of this a little bit darker. Uh-oh, look, it's blending. My world's melting. What happens when I get that? See how I just did that? I'm just painting on top of that selection. If I hit Control H again, I see my ants. Okay? I'm going to hit Control D to deselect. I don't really like what I have. It's all right. It's on that layer. I painted it separately. That's why we work on multiple layers. Okay? Does that make sense? So spend the rest of class going through and just painting those textures and building them up. Okay? Try to get as many as you can, get used to the brushes. Okay? And just, start on something new. That you don't have to be creating textures like Leonardo da Vinci or Monet, I mean, your goal right now is to learn how to use layers and get used to what the brushes do. Okay? So if you want to come over on the side like this, and when you're about to, I'm going to go back to my base here. Before I paint my base, let's pick a brush we haven't used. This brush right here, another texture brush. I'm going to come over here. Let's pick a different color. I'm going to pick a green. Okay? I'm going to pick my Marquee Tool, so I paint inside that box. So as I'm over here right now and I'm doing this, and I'm like, it's a scratchy brush. Cool. How does this brush work at 20%? Hit 20 and see what it does. It works very lighter. That's sort of cool. So start with a dark base, build up on top of it. Maybe that's where I'm going. And then you're like, wait a minute, I want to Command Z. I don't like this. Just a reminder, Command Z one time is Control Z. If you hit Control Alt and Z, it goes back multiple times like this to about 40. And then it stops. Yes?
So every time you go into a new box, you have to create a base?
No.
No. You don't have to create
I'm using the same. Watch what happens. Let me bring them all in here.
Okay.
They're all on the same base layer. And they're all on the same text layer. So one thing I showed is that I showed if you accidentally make a mistake, you can merge all your layers into one, except for the top line layer. You can merge it into one and start over again. So I showed that to everyone because you guys are going to make mistakes and paint on the wrong layer by accident. If that happens, you just commit to it. So look, see here? I took these layers here and I committed to them. See, and I even when I was lecturing, I accidentally painted on another layer. Here, let me find out what that layer's on. So that's on top of boxes. So somehow I accidentally painted up on here on the top. So what I can do is take this. Actually, I didn't paint there. It's on the bottom here. When I was moving my layers, I accidentally went to the bottom layer by accident. So it's easier for anyone to make a mistake. There. So let me show you again. So I have, those are my first two textures that I was working on, right? And I said if you accidentally paint on multiple layers, just merge them together and then start over again. So when I started over here on my next two boxes, I created a base layer. There's my base. I created a texture pass. I created a high. So here, I didn't finish the high part yet. So let me come back to my base. Let me finish this guy. So let's say I'm over here. Oops, I'm painting outside of the box. What does that mean? Well, come over here, take your Marquee Tool, select this little area. There, now it's selected. So now I could come in here with a brush. I could grab that color. How am I doing that, by the way? When I'm in my brush mode, you notice how quickly I grab a color? If I hit Alt, it gives me the color picker. See that? So I have two ways of getting the color picker. One, I double click the color, and then I could grab that color. Or, if I'm painting over here and I want to get this dark color, everyone watching, I hit Alt real quick and I touch and it gives me that dark color. So see, now I'm painting it. Now, why is it painting really slow? What's my brush on? My brush opacity is at 20%. If I click to 100, now I'm painting out full color. See that? So you could paint in a base. You could paint a base full color like that. That's fine. But let's say you want to get a scratchy feel to your base. You come over here. You select that color. You go a little lighter. And you can see it change right there, right? Then we come over here. And I'm going to lower my brush down to 20 now. And now I'm going to come in here and go. Now that's a little hard to see on the monitors, so I'm going to make it even lighter. There. And I'm going to go like that. There. Now I have a scratchy base. That's my base. Now I'm going to come up to the texture layer. So I come up to texture. Let's grab a different color. Maybe I'll go with something that's a little bit more blue-green. So I raise that slider up to the blue-green. I hit OK. I come over here. I'm going to pick a different texture, like this guy. And then I come over here, and I'm just going to, at 100%, I'm going to touch it in there and see what happens. There. I put something different. That's on a separate layer. Okay? And then come back in. Now, your first 8 of these I want you to do on your own. After you get 8 done, or actually, do a whole page would be 12 would be fine. Okay? There's 4 in a row. There's 3 rows. That's 12. After that, I'm then going to give you some textures to look at, to try to mimic, like a wood floor and like stone. And then you just have to build them up. Okay? I'm going to stop the recorder real quick and let you go experiment and have fun with the brushes and paint and make a mess of layers, and don't worry about it. That's part of the learning process. You'll make a mess of the layer, but before you do anything, stop and save. Again, you've done work. You need to save. You don't want to lose 20 minutes of work. And by the way, if you accidentally click the X button to close the file, it will give you a warning window that says, do you want to save? And if you say no, you've just deleted all your work. Okay? I've done that plenty of times. Okay? One time I was literally working, and that button came up, and my pen slipped out of my hand and hit the keyboard, and it hit right on enter on no, and then deleted everything. Okay? True story. Another time I was right in the middle of like a 10-hour paint, and I hadn't saved in about 8 hours. I've been working since the morning, and the power went out in my house, and the file was gone. There's no bringing it back. That's why some painters, we have backup boxes, like these 2 batteries, and you have them hooked up in your house. And luckily at my house, I have a little camping trailer. I go in my trailer and turn on the generator sometimes, because when summer hits and everyone's using their AC, in my neighborhood, people like, must be made of money or something, but people are like blowing the AC left and right, and I'm like, dude, the power starts shutting off all over the neighborhood. We have old transformers. When that happens, I go work in my little trailer because I can't afford to lose a file, or I have the battery backup. Problem is battery backups get expensive. They're about $100 to $200. Costco every now and then gets one for about $150, and it'll back up and run a computer and a monitor for only about 10-15 minutes, which gives you time to save your file and back it up before you just lose power. So that's why we're always saving as we're working. All right, cool.